I've read through your book, For Such a Time as This. What was
Yeah.
the motivation there? I know it's in the story of Esther. She had kind of a providential series of events that led her to be queen, and she played obviously a pivotal role in the history of the Jewish people. But tell me about the title of your book.
Well, you're exactly right about the Esther analogy. And I will say, let me start by saying what Esther did for human history is far more than anything I will ever do. But I think that story is in the Bible in Esther 4:14, where the words "for such a time as this" are. I think that's in there not just for me to hear, but for anyone listening to hear. And I say that those words are important to me because I was so nervous to take the job as press secretary, in the middle of COVID-19. And my dad texted me and he said, "Kayleigh, maybe you were made, quote, for such a time as this," the words on my book cover behind
Right.
me. And separately, 3 weeks later, a Democrat commentator said to me, "Maybe you were made, quote, for such a time as this." And when two people from very different ideological backgrounds provide for you the same message in a short amount of time, I think it was God's way of saying, I want you to go do this. And I think it's applicable to anyone listening. And it's the animating theme of the book that no matter what you're going through, whatever trials you're going through in life, whatever new opportunities that seem scary come your way, know that you're in this position for such a time as this. And God can use the bad and turn it into good, or use a incredible opportunity like being press secretary to further his kingdom. So that's the main theme of the book. You hit it right out of the park at the top.
In the book, you talk about Mark Meadows and others who crossed your path who are also believers in Jesus. And I guess from your time in the White House, what was a time that really you felt God affirming you being there, or you felt God's intervention or presence, or any way you'd like to address that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there are many examples, but one that comes to mind is when the president of the United States got COVID-19. I first learned of his positive test on October 1st. He was on Hannity at the time. And I was wondering if he knew he was positive. As he's on Hannity. I was really stunned by the news. But prior to that, Fauci, for instance, said that the confirmation, or rather the nomination ceremony for Amy Coney Barrett in the Rose Garden, was the place in which there was a super spreader event. A lot of us got COVID, including myself. And it was so interesting because I had thought back to that day, and that day was a really spiritually moving day for me. I had walked around the National Mall with my mom and my daughter. There was a national prayer march. So preaching was literally ringing out throughout the nation's capital. I go into the White House rushing to this nomination ceremony, and I turn the corner, and in the West Wing lobby is Franklin Graham and Jensen Franklin and all of these other great Christian preachers. And, I asked Franklin Graham to come to my office. My assistant and I were huge fans. My whole staff was. Some of us took pictures with him, and he went in and met with the president of the United States, much like his father, Billy Graham, did. He met with so many American presidents. And it's just, there was good, obviously the embodiment of good in those great Christian pastors. There was also evil lurking out in the Rose Garden with COVID-19. And thankfully the president got through, I got through. Many of us got through unscathed by COVID-19, but many Americans did not, for whom we remember now and forever. But when we went on the aftermath of recovering to a church service at the International Church of Las Vegas, it's cool. I go to church with my family, but never with the president of the United States. But after all recovering from COVID, standing there and hearing these amazing lyrics about new wine. It's the first time I had heard that song about God using the crushing and the pressing to make new wine out of you. This beautiful end product doesn't come without the hurt, the pain, and the crushing beforehand. It just started to tear up because I could just so personally feel God's presence in that moment.
I was interested as far as God's providence, or, obviously we don't know exactly God's ways, but it was interesting to me that you went to Georgetown. I spent a summer there as an intern also, but that you then crossed paths with Dana Perino. And I was watching her this morning and just thinking, the two of you are similar in some ways. I kind of a similar vibe, you might say. And so I was just interested. And then, of course, you crossed paths with Sarah Sanders too. But can you talk about some of those kind of things that kind of led you to this moment of accepting press secretary?
Yeah, I was an intern for the Bush administration, which is just so crazy. That was like just over 10 years ago. And I remembered watching Dana Perino do a great job at the podium. And I only got to go to one briefing, but I was in the back of the room and watching her take questions and doing such a great job at it, never knowing, more than 10 years later, I would be there. It was surreal when I got the job. It's one of the things that just really stuck with me is I can't believe I was an intern. And the last time I was in this room, I was just a young kid running around, trying my best to learn about the American government system and media and whatnot. But, another way that I think God works is sometimes through the interactions and relationships you have. I mean, the idea that my first job out of college was for Governor Mike Huckabee. I was a producer for his show, and Sarah Sanders is running around the green room, just, a young girl herself. Crazy to think that this first job, in this green room are two people, one who would become press secretary and become really someone I looked up to, a role model, Sarah Sanders, and then I would become press secretary thereafter. I mean, it's crazy how life comes full circle, but I think it was meant to be for me to know the Huckabees and for them to set a great example, and Sarah to do such a great job at the podium and share with me her Jesus calling devotional 2 years prior to my first briefing when I was so nervous and had so much trepidation. She was able as a sister in Christ to give me a lot of comfort before going to the podium for the first time.
I noticed in the book you talk about your father and saying, be on the offense. He had played college football. You'd mentioned in the book and everything. Mm-hmm. And so maybe could you talk about your strategy as a press secretary, kind of when you went out there each day? I know you were prepared. I saw the notebook. And so what was that offense only strategy, you might say?
Yeah, my dad, exactly. He said, come up with a phrase for your office, for your press office. And I came up with offense only. And what I mean by that is this, I wanted to come into the press shop and give the press a chance, because I think in an ideal world, what serves the American people is the press asking tough questions, but substantive ones based on the issues, getting information for the American people, and the press secretary responding. They became personal very quickly. I was under no illusion that wouldn't be the case because, in my view, the liberal media always treats conservatives differently in Republican administrations. So by briefing number 2, they had kind of crossed that red line of becoming very personal and caustic in their attacks. And so I was prepared with headlines. If they wanted to talk about COVID-19 and the history, we were also going to talk about their reporting and some of the false reporting that they just brush under the rug. So, I did that. And I think the key is one, as Christians, we want to be graceful. We want to be kind when we respond. We want to be of sober mind, which I was. And I think I brought that. But that doesn't mean we don't have to be tough and have accountability and be able to fight back in not with literal fighting, but fight back with facts and substance and footnotes, and have accountability. Because to me, when the press stops working for the people, it's a real travesty, I think, for the way government and the relationship with the media should work. So I brought toughness, but I also think I was able to bring grace and a softness alongside the toughness.
No, yeah, I thought you were very good at your job. It was impressive to see. As I said, it did remind me of Dana Perino in a way, when I watched her back in those days. As you look, of course, the Trump presidency may be to be continued. We'll see. But as you look back on the previous 4 years, what is your kind of takeaway? What are some of the big headlines that you feel that Trump, his big contributions to our country and what we should take from those 4 years?
Well, the biggest contribution is certainly what he did with the courts. I mean, to have 3 conservative, and by conservative, I don't mean like politically conservative. I mean conservative in the sense of jurisprudence, being an originalist, being a textualist, 3 conservative Supreme Court justices. I mean, the fact that we're even talking about Roe v. Wade potentially being overturned, that law that is, or that case that has cost the lives of 62 million children in this country. It's a scourge on the American consciousness. But the fact that we could even talk about that, it's because of the Trump justices and then the judges throughout the federal court system. So that's his biggest accomplishment. There are many others I could go through, but I think ultimately what he brought was a sense of authenticity to the presidency. It used to be you wanted a mannequin politician, a perfectly manicured president who had everything focus grouped and poll tested. And this is what we think the American people want to see, this perfect person. And he destroyed that playbook by just being authentic, by talking like a casual person with the audience, by going off script. And, I didn't agree with everything he ever tweeted, of course, but I did like that the authenticity I saw on the campaign trail. The same way he talked there is the way he talked in the Oval Office. So when he said, I'm going to get out of the Iran deal, I'm going to get out of the Paris Climate Accord, and the establishment said, no, you can't do that, he was the one being true to those promises behind the scenes. One quick example is when Kellyanne and Bill Barr, were saying to him, look, you can't be in the Obamacare lawsuit during COVID-19. This is kind of politically perilous. One of them said that. I think that Kellyanne focused on the political side, Barr on the legal side. But I was asked point blank by the president, what do you think? And I said, I agree with Kellyanne. I agree with Bill Barr. I think that makes a whole lot of sense from a political standpoint. And he looked at me and said, Kayleigh, I will always stay true to the promises I made to my voters. And if I promised it, I'm going to follow through. And it just gave me immense respect for him. He kept his word. He was authentic. And I think he's changed politics forever because of it.
And then last question, as a Christian, as an American, based on your life experiences to this date, what brings you the most hope as you look forward for America? What brings you hope, even in these kind of turbulent times?
They are turbulent times. I mean, what gives me hope is I think there are Americans everywhere that are waking up. I think polling shows that. I think people realize more and more that the political system as it currently stands is failing them. But ultimately, what gives me hope is knowing that there's someone so much greater than the political process and control. And no one knows why certain things happen. No one knows why certain people become president at certain moments. But, I know there's a creator and someone so much bigger that's in control, which is why people say it's so scary to bring children into the world at this time. And I understand the feeling, certainly. But for me as a mom of one, hopefully a mom of more in the future, for me, we need more and more men and women of great character to be brought into this world, to be raised as great Americans and great Christian men and women of faith. So at the end of the day, the end of the story has already been written. Go read Revelation. I know you have, but anyone listening, it's already been written. No matter what happens politically here, we know what's going to happen eternally. And that means Jesus Christ coming back and he'll rule the universe.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'll look forward to writing this story, and it should come out in the next few days. And I know our readers will appreciate it and hearing more of your faith story.
Thank you.